So I would argue that gay marriage, and I would argue also euthanasia, is the next step. It is the next step towards the complete annihilation of any meaning of the individual in society. A society that seems to pride itself on what someone feels is happy or for their good. I'm sorry, if marriage is a legal, binding contract, it has nothing to do with your happiness. It has to do with having children and raising them in a stable environment. Now, homosexual couples, while I would argue they shouldn't get married, should not, if they want to get into a legal, somehow legally binding contract to get the financial benefits, again, if that's the ends justify the means for you, that's fine. That's fine. And I would argue that most hospitals that don't allow people that are gay, or the idea that if you're on your deathbed you can only have your family there, I would argue that's nonsense. Because if I'm dying, or my best friend is dying, I want to be in the room with him even though I'm not his family member. So I would argue that that should just, in general, be wiped away for everybody. And I would argue I'm not stopping your right. You still have a right to marry a man or a woman depending on your gender. In that social contract. Marriage isn't just a social contract, though. It's also a religious institution. And so your argument is not taken up with society. It's taken up with the religion. Because society has no problem, because society has no freaking care if you're happy or not. At least not when it comes to laws. If it was about being happy, I could do a lot of things that I'm not going to do. If your complaint is that it's legislating morality, that's what laws are. The law of don't kill somebody is morality, and it's saying you can't do that. You cannot kill me. I cannot kill you. That is a moral judgment. So to argue that it's just the right-wing moral agenda, well, no, it's a stable society agenda. So, I mean, the fact that the ancient friggin' Romans and Greeks may have had homosexual lovers but didn't get married is probably a good indication that they recognized it wasn't a good idea. And there are also homosexuals today that are against gay marriage for several reasons. One is that it will make traditional marriage less. Another one is that they don't need to be married to be happy. Another one is they can point to Sweden and say that legalization has been, I think it was Sweden, marriage has been legalized there, but the homosexual groups that population that doesn't get married is 96%. What you want, or what many homosexuals really want, is legitimacy in the eyes of society and equality with heterosexual couples. I would argue that what they really want is personal, a personal recognition from other people based on the same idea of school violence, those kids that are in families that they don't get paid attention to. It also has to do with less of a view of themselves. They are slaves to, let's think about the reasons for homosexuality. What are given? Genetics is given, and choice is given. You can't have both. If it's genetics, and you're arguing, therefore, you can't help who you love, well, then how is it a choice? Because there are people that are homosexual who are happy, who've stopped being homosexual and are happy. And you can argue that, yeah, congenitally, a development may occur that messes you up, and that's understandable. That's nothing that gets passed on. But if you're going to argue it's genetic and there's gay gene, okay, how does that gay gene get passed on? Because again, as I said before, you're not producing kids. And from a biological standpoint, that's nuts. So congenital, I can understand. Genetic, no. And I would still argue that you would have to explain how people can choose to be gay and then choose not to be gay. Let's see, where was I going with this? Oh, so yeah, getting back to it. Gay marriage is fundamentally a mistake for society to make. Now, will we make it as a society? Eventually, yeah, we'll make that decision. Because I would argue that while it could be a logical fallacy just to claim something's a slippery slope, humans are illogical, and we'll do it. We will do it. We'll push it. I would just argue that in the future, people that are complaining about, especially Jesus freaks, maybe attitude or way of spinning things, or even my way of spinning things, take a good hard look at the evidence, historically, ethically, psychologically for the child. Because if it's just about your happiness between you and somebody else, you're not thinking about your kid. You just aren't. If you think you can raise a child in that relationship, you know what? You might be able to. But those gender roles are hardwired into our brains. And it has nothing to do with what's between your legs. It has everything to do with every other factor about you. The very fact that we can say, well, men think this way, women think another way. There might be that occasional guy that thinks the way women do, and they can be perfectly straight. How do you explain that? But the very fact that I can say, well, guys' way of caring for somebody is to go and get a job and financially benefit them overall, whereas females have more to do with what modern feminist ethics say, which is care by improving relationships. How can I make such a claim and then say that, well, it doesn't matter? I mean, they two guys can get married.